Sometimes, the things we forget about come back to change everything. A letter left in a drawer, dust-covered and yellowed with time, would one day bring a woman to a man who had sworn he'd never love again. The wind was sharp that morning, slicing across the empty Montana plains like a blade. Silas Rourke stood on the porch of his ranch house, his hat pulled low over tired eyes, watching the sky turn gray above the hills. He didn't speak much these days. Most folks in Briar Ridge had learned not to expect more than a nod or a gruff "mornin'" from him. He used to smile once, long ago. But that was before the sickness. Before his wife, Lila, died bringing their daughter into the world. That was 2 winters ago. Mercy, their little girl, was all he had left now. And she was the only reason he hadn't ridden off into the mountains and never come back. Inside the house, Mercy was trying to braid her doll's hair. She looked up with her mother's soft eyes when she saw her father step back inside, his boots heavy with mud. "You gonna eat, Pa?" Silas shook his head and sat by the fireplace. "Ain't hungry." He said that a lot. Later that afternoon he was cleaning out the small writing desk in the front room. It still had her things in it, letters, lace ribbons, dried flowers pressed between books. His hand stopped when he opened the last drawer and pulled out a yellowed envelope. The address was written in his own handwriting. But the ink had faded with time. It was the letter he'd written a year ago when the pain was still raw, and loneliness had been whispering in his ear. He had answered one of those mail-order bride notices in the back of a newspaper, sent by a preacher in Ohio. The preacher had said he knew a young woman who wanted to serve God by serving others, by marrying a good man and helping build a home in the West. Silas had written back. But he never sent a second letter. Never asked again. Never thought anyone would really come. He had forgotten all about it. Until now. Meanwhile, 2 states away. Eden Blythe folded her last dress into a small trunk and tied her bonnet beneath her chin. The preacher and his wife stood nearby with soft smiles and wet eyes. "You sure about this, Eden?" the preacher asked. "It's a long journey." And the man never wrote again. Eden smiled gently. "He wrote once. That's all I needed. I feel the Lord leading me there. If he's changed his mind, that's for God to work out, not me." She lifted her bag and stepped into the waiting wagon. She didn't know that the man she was going to meet had buried his heart in the ground with his wife. She didn't know she was about to walk into a home where love had long been dead. But Eden believed in love, the kind that heals, not hurts. The kind that stays. She believed it could live again, even in the hardest soil. Even in the heart of a man like Silas Rourke. He didn't ask for a bride. He didn't want a second chance. But there she was, standing at the gate with nothing but a suitcase, a smile, and a faith stronger than the wind that howled through the canyon. The wagon kicked up dust as it rumbled down the dirt road, growing smaller behind her. Eden Blythe stood alone now, her boots sinking into the dry path that led to a lonely-looking house beyond the gate. The sky above was wide and blue, but the land felt quiet, too quiet. She wiped her hands on her skirt and stepped forward, her trunk bouncing a little as she pulled it behind her. The gate creaked when she touched it, like it hadn't been opened in a long time. There was no welcome. No voice calling her name. Just the sound of a distant cowbell and the whisper of dry grass. She took a deep breath. "Here I am, Lord," she whispered. At the house, a little girl peeked out from behind a window curtain. Her eyes were big and curious. Eden smiled at her and gave a small wave. The girl blinked, then vanished behind the curtain. The front door opened. Out stepped a tall, broad-shouldered man with dark hair, a rough beard, and eyes that didn't shine. Silas Rourke looked like he'd seen a ghost. His brow furrowed as he stared at her, arms folded across his chest. "You lost?" he asked flatly. Eden walked up the steps with slow, steady grace. "No, sir. I believe I'm right where I'm meant to be." Silas didn't move. She held out a small envelope. "Your letter?" she said gently. "You wrote to Reverend Bell in Ohio. He told me about you, about your little girl. I came." Silas took the letter but didn't open it. His jaw tightened. "That was over a year ago. I never asked for you to come." Eden nodded. "I figured that might be the case. But the Lord put it in my heart to come anyway." He turned away and pushed the door open wider. "I don't need a wife. I'm not here to force anything," Eden said kindly. "Just tell me where the town is and I'll find a room there." He looked at her again, really looked. She didn't flinch under his cold stare. There was something about her eyes. They weren't proud or stubborn. Just still. Like deep water that didn't stir in the wind. Finally, Silas muttered, "You can rest on the porch. I'll get my horse and take you to town." Mercy stood in the hallway, clutching her doll to her chest. "Is she my new mama?" she asked softly. Silas knelt down beside her. No, baby girl. She's just passing through. Mercy looked at the window where Eden sat quietly on the porch, her hands folded in her lap. She looks kind. Silas sighed. Kind don't mean safe. They rode in silence, the wagon creaking beneath them. Eden watched the land roll by, brown hills, lonely trees, fences that leaned from too many storms. It was quiet but not empty. She saw beauty in it. I didn't come to marry a man against his will, Eden said softly, breaking the silence. I came to be useful. To love where love's needed. Silas didn't answer. You don't have to open your door, she continued. But your little girl? She looked like she needed someone to braid her hair. That made him glance at her just once. When they reached the edge of Briar Ridge, Silas pulled the wagon to a stop near the small church building. The preacher there, a round man named Pastor Jessup, welcomed Eden kindly. She can stay here for now, he told Silas. Plenty of room in the back. Silas gave a tight nod, tipped his hat to Eden and drove away. That night, Silas couldn't sleep. Mercy had fallen asleep in his arms, her small head on his chest. But Silas stared at the ceiling, listening to the wind tap on the window. Why had that woman come? Why did her voice still echo in his ears? I came to love where love's needed. He clenched his jaw. I don't need love, he whispered to the dark. Not anymore. But the truth was, part of him wasn't so sure. It started with a small cough, but that sound would change everything. In the silence of the night, a little girl's fever would become the fire that melted a cowboy's frozen heart. The days passed slowly at the Rourke Ranch. Silas worked longer hours, driving cattle, fixing fences, keeping his hands busy so his mind wouldn't wander. But it did wander, often, to the woman with the calm eyes and steady voice. He told himself she was gone now, that it didn't matter. But Mercy hadn't stopped asking about her. Where did the lady go, Pa? She asked one morning, her voice faint and her cheeks pinker than usual. Silas noticed her eyes looked a little glassy. She's stayin' at the church, he said as he pressed the back of his hand to her forehead. It was warm. Too warm. You sick, baby girl? Mercy gave a little shrug and leaned against him. I just feel tired. He picked her up and carried her inside. Later that night, the coughing started around supper. Mercy hadn't eaten more than 2 bites of stew. She curled up on the bed with her doll and didn't move much. Her cough was dry and sharp. By midnight, her skin was burning. Silas tried cold cloths and cool water. He whispered to her, sang one of the old lullabies Lila used to sing. Nothing worked. Her breathing grew shallow. Her lips were dry. He rocked her gently, feeling helpless, feeling the same fear he'd felt the night Lila died. Don't you go, Mercy, he whispered hoarsely. You hear me? Don't you go. Then he did something he hadn't done in 2 years. He prayed. God, if you're there, I can't lose her too. I ain't strong enough. Help me. Help her. At first light, Silas saddled his horse and rode hard into town. The preacher wasn't awake yet, but someone was already up, sweeping the steps of the church. She looked up and saw his face, pale, tight with worry. It's Mercy, he said, nearly breathless. She's burning up. I don't know what to do. Eden didn't ask questions. She ran inside, grabbed her bag and followed him back to the horse. Hold on, she said. I'm coming. Mercy was still too still. Her cheeks were red, her lips cracked. Eden rolled up her sleeves and went straight to work, mixing herbs, soaking cloths, whispering prayers. Silas watched from the corner, helpless and afraid. Eden never panicked. She sat beside the bed all through the day and into the night, placing cool cloths on Mercy's head, lifting her gently to give her sips of tea. She's strong, Eden whispered once. Just like her mama, I bet. Silas's eyes filled with tears he didn't let fall. Hours passed. The fever broke just before dawn. Mercy stirred and looked around with weak eyes. Miss Eden, she whispered. Eden smiled and brushed hair from her forehead. I'm right here, sweetheart. Can you braid my doll's hair again? Silas choked on a breath. Eden glanced at him. She'll be okay, she said softly. God was listening. Silas looked down at the little girl who meant more to him than his own life. Then he looked at Eden, the woman who'd walked into their world without asking for anything in return, and gave everything she had. You saved her, he said. Eden shook her head. No, sir. Love did. The sun came up slowly over the land, casting golden light across the fields. Eden stepped out onto the porch to let the cool breeze touch her face. She didn't hear Silas follow her until he spoke. You can stay. For now, he said gruffly. Eden nodded, not needing more. Thank you. But inside, something in Silas had shifted. It wasn't loud. It wasn't clear. But it was real. He had seen a kind of love that didn't ask to be let in. It simply came in when it was needed most. Most folks leave when they're not welcome. But she stayed. Not because she was stubborn, because her heart had decided long before her feet ever touched that dusty ground. Eden stayed in the little guest room at the back of the house. It was small and quiet, with a crooked window that let the sunlight in every morning. She didn't ask for more. She didn't push. Silas didn't say much to her either. But something had changed between them. She had saved Mercy. That mattered more than words. Mercy, on the other hand, had plenty to say. "Will you read to me again tonight, Miss Eden? Can you teach me how to sew? Are you gonna stay forever?" Eden would just smile. "One day at a time, little one." Word spread fast in Briar Ridge. Folks whispered behind fences and storefronts. "She's still living out there? Silas Rourke didn't marry her, did he? Must be some kind of arrangement." The church ladies looked worried. A few shopkeepers looked annoyed. But Pastor Jessup only smiled when people came asking. "That woman," he'd say, "has more grace in her little finger than most folks carry in their whole selves." Still, the talk stung. Eden heard it when she went into town for supplies. She heard it in the pause before someone answered her, "Good morning." She saw it in the way they looked at her, like a puzzle that didn't fit. But she stayed kind. She stayed soft. Because God didn't call her to be liked. He called her to love. At the ranch, Silas watched her. Not like before when he kept his distance. Now he watched her with quiet respect. He saw how she cooked simple meals, always setting aside a plate for Mercy before herself. He saw how she knelt beside the girl at bedtime, praying with her like a mother would. He saw how she sang while hanging laundry, soft songs about hope and grace and things he hadn't believed in for years. And it scared him. Because a part of him wanted to believe again. One evening by the fire, Mercy had gone to bed. The house was quiet except for the pop of the firewood. Silas sat in his chair, staring at the flames. Eden sat nearby, sewing the rip in Mercy's dress. "You didn't have to stay," he said, voice low. "I know," Eden replied, not looking up. "And yet you did." Eden nodded. "Not all callings come with open doors. Some come with locked ones. I came to help, even if you didn't open the door all the way." Silas rubbed the back of his neck. "You're not like anyone I've ever known." "I've been called worse," she said, smiling. That made him chuckle just a little. The sound surprised them both. A few days later, Silas asked Eden to ride with him to check the cattle fences. She agreed and they rode side by side in the quiet. She pointed out birds. He pointed out storm clouds. They didn't speak much, but it wasn't an uncomfortable silence. It was the kind that said, "I see you. I know you're here. That's enough." On the way back, Eden spoke gently. "You carry a heavy grief, Silas." His jaw tightened. "I'm not here to take her place," she said. "I'm just here to stand beside the space she left behind." That stopped him in his tracks. For the first time, he didn't shut down or walk away. He just nodded, slowly, and whispered, "Thank you." That night, as Silas sat on the porch, he looked up at the stars. He'd never met anyone like Eden Blythe. She had come to his house without fear, stayed without anger, and loved without reason. And even though he had made a vow to never love again, something inside him was beginning to wonder. What if that vow had been made out of pain, not truth? His hands were rough from work and weather, hers soft from care and prayer. When they touched, it wasn't loud or fancy, but something holy moved between them. Mercy had wandered too far chasing a butterfly. The land around the ranch was open, but not safe for little feet to wander alone. When Eden called her name and got no answer, her heart dropped. She ran through the tall grass, eyes wide, calling again. Silas was near the barn when he heard her cry. He dropped his tools and ran faster than he thought he could. He didn't think about pride or keeping distance. All he thought was, Mercy. They found her near the stream behind the trees, sitting on a rock, crying. Her dress was muddy. Her ankle twisted. She had fallen and couldn't walk. Eden knelt and wiped the girl's tears. "It's all right, sweetheart. We've got you." Mercy wrapped her arms around Eden's neck. Silas crouched down, brushing hair from Mercy's cheek. "You scared us, baby girl." "I'm sorry," she sniffled. He looked at Eden. Their eyes met. No words passed. Just a silent agreement, "We carry her together." He lifted Mercy into his arms, but Eden kept a hand on her back. Silas didn't move until Eden stood close beside him, matching his steps through the tall grass. And when Mercy whispered, "Will you both stay with me forever?" neither of them answered. But Eden reached for Silas's free hand, and this time he didn't pull away. His hand trembled a little at first. Then it settled into hers. They walked the rest of the way like that. No one watching. No one saying a word. Just a man, a woman, and a child held between them. Something in his heart cracked open like dry earth after a storm. Not fast. Not loud. But deep. That evening, Silas brought Eden a small wooden box. He held it out without speaking. Inside was a silver hair comb. It had belonged to Lila, his late wife. "I want you to have this," he said. Eden's hand hovered over it, unsure. "I'm not replacing her," she whispered. "No," he said, voice soft and sure. "You're not. But you're healing what she left behind." Tears filled her eyes. She reached out, not just for the gift, but for his hand. And this time he held on first. He had made a promise to never love again. But some promises are made in pain, not truth. And when love knocks with quiet hands, even the strongest vow begins to shake. Silas stood by the fence, his hat in his hands. The land stretched wide before him, but it felt small compared to what was stirring inside his chest. He had tried to stay distant. He had tried not to feel. But he saw Eden every day now, in the kitchen, in the barn, in the way Mercy smiled again. He had made a vow. Not to another person. To himself. He had promised to close the door forever. But now, he could hear Eden's laughter behind that door. Mercy's joy. The warmth of something he had buried deep. And he didn't know how to keep the vow without losing them both. Inside, Eden was brushing Mercy's hair. The girl sat on a stool, legs swinging, face full of peace. "Do you think God puts people together on purpose?" Mercy asked suddenly. Eden smiled. "I do." "Even broken people?" "Especially broken people." Silas walked in and saw them. His daughter safe and calm, Eden kneeling behind her like she belonged there. Not in a loud way. In a quiet, true way. Like furniture that fits the room. Like a song that already lives in the walls. He cleared his throat. "I need to speak with you," he said to Eden. Mercy looked up, but Eden only nodded and followed him out to the porch. They stood in silence for a moment. Wind brushed the grass flat and wild. "I told myself I'd never fall again," he said. "I made a vow." Eden said nothing. She waited. "I thought it would protect me. Protect Mercy. But the truth is, that vow's starting to feel more like a wall than a promise." Eden looked at him gently. "Walls don't keep pain out, Silas. They only keep love from coming in." His hand shook. "I don't know how to let go." "You already have," she said, and reached for his hand again. He didn't stop her. This time he held on like a man reaching for life. That night, Silas knelt beside his bed for the first time in years. Not to ask, but to thank. And though the words came slowly, they came like water over dry land. "Thank you for sending her." There were no fancy flowers. No crowd. No music but the wind through the leaves. But when two hearts say yes where pain once lived, God listens closer than the angels do. The cottonwood trees stood tall at the edge of the pasture, their wide branches swaying like gentle hands in prayer. It wasn't a church building. There were no stained glass windows. Just grass, sky, and a small wooden cross leaning against the trunk of the largest tree. Silas had picked this place. Not because it was grand, but because it was real. He stood there with Mercy beside him, holding a bouquet she had made herself from wildflowers. Her dress had a little patch near the bottom where she'd ripped it last week, and Eden had sewn it with her own careful hands. Eden wore white, not bright white but soft like milk. Like forgiveness. She walked across the field toward them, calm and sure. No music. No crowd. Just the sound of her steps on the earth and the beating of Silas's heart. Pastor Jessup waited by the cross. He had tears in his eyes before he even spoke. The three of them stood together, Silas, Eden, and Mercy. And when the pastor said, "Who gives this woman?" Mercy shouted, "We do," and held up her little bouquet like a flag of joy. The small group laughed. But Eden cried. Because no one had ever claimed her like that before. Silas looked into her eyes. "I made a vow once," he said quietly, "to close my heart forever. But God sent you to open it again. Eden Blythe, I choose you. I will love you, serve you, and walk beside you, every step, every day." Eden took a deep breath. "I didn't come here for love," she whispered. "I came to help a hurting family. But somewhere along the way you became my home." Silas roared. "I will honor you, lift you, and love you with all I am." They didn't kiss yet. They held hands tight and trembling. Then Pastor Jessup smiled wide. "By God's grace, I now pronounce you husband and wife." Mercy clapped, laughing through happy tears. Silas leaned in and kissed Eden gently, like he was learning the meaning of safe for the first time. The wind picked up, and the cottonwood leaves danced above them, like heaven itself had leaned down to witness it. Back at the house there was no big feast. Just stew and cornbread. But they shared it with joy, and Mercy kept slipping her hand into Eden's as if to make sure she wouldn't disappear. And Eden never let go. That night, as the sun sank low behind the hills, Silas looked at the woman now wearing his name. "You're my second chance," he said. Eden shook her head gently. "No," she whispered. "I'm your answered prayer." The walls of the house had heard sorrow before, tears, loss, silence. But now they heard something new. A cry. A wail. A beginning. And with it, a love too big for words. Eden had been quiet for most of the morning. Her hand rested on her belly, now round and full. Mercy sat beside her, reading out loud from a little Bible with pages so worn they curled at the corners. Silas was outside working near the barn. He kept glancing toward the house. Something in the air felt different. Eden winced. A sharp breath. Then another. She gripped the arm of the chair and closed her eyes. "Mercy," she said softly, "go get your pa." The little girl didn't wait. She ran as fast as she could, braid flying behind her, calling out, "Pa, it's time. The baby's comin'." Silas froze for a second. Then he dropped his tools and ran. They had made a space ready. A little cradle. Clean blankets. But nothing prepares a man for the sound of pain in the voice of the woman he loves. Eden was strong. She didn't cry out much. Just breathed and prayed and held Silas's hand so tight it turned white. Mercy stood outside the room with her doll pressed to her chest, whispering, "Please God help Mama." Hours passed, slow and quiet. Then came the cry. A small, sharp sound that filled every corner of the house. A baby's first cry. Silas dropped to his knees beside the bed, staring at the tiny bundle Eden held close. "It's a girl," she whispered, smiling through tears. "She's perfect." The baby was red-faced and loud, squirming against her mama's chest. Eden kissed her tiny head. Silas reached out, hands shaking. "May I?" he asked. Eden nodded. He held his daughter like she was made of glass, but inside he felt stronger than he'd ever felt before. Mercy peeked in and gasped. "She's here. I have a sister." Eden opened her arm and Mercy rushed in, crawling onto the bed and wrapping around them both. Silas looked at them, his wife, his daughters, and felt something he hadn't known he was missing. Not the kind that comes from silence. The kind that comes from belonging. That night he stood outside looking up at the stars. His arms were empty now, but his heart was full. "I didn't think I'd ever feel this again," he whispered. Behind him, Eden stepped out holding the baby close, wrapped in a soft quilt. "She hasn't stopped holding my finger," she said with a smile. "She knows you're hers," Silas replied. "No," Eden said. "She knows she's ours." He pulled them both into his arms. No more running. No more hiding. Just home. Sometimes a letter carries more than words. It carries memories, truth, and choices. And when it lands on a table already full of peace, it can either break what's been built, or prove it stronger than ever. The letter came folded, yellow-edged, and sealed with a name Silas hadn't spoken in years. He found it in the mailbox, resting quiet like a snake in tall grass. He didn't open it right away. Just stared at it, heart thudding. Eden was inside humming to the baby, Mercy sitting at her feet, brushing a doll's hair. The house was full of small sounds, peaceful sounds. And here he stood with a piece of the past, heavy in his hand. He finally opened it. His eyes moved slow over the words. Then slower still. It was from Lila's sister, his first wife's only family. She had just heard he'd remarried. She wanted to visit. Not to cause trouble. To meet the child Lila had never lived to raise. To see the life Silas had built without her. Silas felt something twist deep in his chest. He didn't know how Eden would take it. He didn't know if he could face the grief again, not with so much joy now under this roof. He laid the letter on the kitchen table, unsure what to say. Eden walked in, wiping her hands on a cloth. She saw his face. Saw the open envelope. She didn't ask. Just stood beside him and waited. Silas finally spoke. "It's from Lila's sister. She's comin', says she wants to meet Mercy. Says she hopes I found peace." Eden looked down at the letter. Then up at him. "You loved her." He nodded once. "I didn't know how to let her go. Not fully. Not until you." Eden's voice was soft. "Let her sister come." "You sure?" "She's part of the story. But she's not the end of it." When Lila's sister arrived, she was older than Silas remembered. Grayer. Quieter. She hugged Mercy like she was holding Lila for a moment. Cried gently into her hair. Thanked Eden for loving a child that wasn't hers by blood, but was hers by choice. And she didn't stay long. Just long enough to say, she would have been proud of you. After she left, Silas stood out on the porch, rocking the baby in his arms. Eden came to his side, resting her head against his shoulder. Still think your heart's too broken to love? She asked. Silas looked at his home, his girls, the fields beyond. No, he whispered. I think my heart was waiting all this time, for this. Some stories don't end with a single moment, they stretch out like the endless sky, full of promise and light. This is not just a story about two people who found love. It's about the life they built, step by step, forever after. The morning sun stretched soft fingers through the kitchen window. Silas sat at the table, holding the baby's hand. Eden moved quietly, humming a tune only she knew. Mercy laughed nearby, chasing their little dog through the yard. The house was full of life. Full of love. Full of grace. Silas looked up, meeting Eden's eyes. No words were needed. She smiled back, the kind of smile that says, you are home. You are loved. They had come so far, from pain, from loss, from promises made in sorrow. Now they stood together. A family. Not perfect, but real. And forever. As Silas helped Mercy plant wildflowers along the fence, Eden wrapped her arms around him. Thank you, she whispered. For what? He asked. For loving us. He kissed her forehead gently. For forever after, he said. And that is how their story lives on. Not in grand halls or shiny jewels, but in simple days filled with kindness, faith, and the quiet power of love that never gives up. If you enjoyed this story of hope, love, and second chances, please like this video and subscribe for more heartfelt tales like this. Your support helps bring more stories to life. Thank you for being part of this journey.